Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this anniversary Fireside chat hosted by Horwath HTL. It's been a pleasure. We started this on the 11th of December last year. We've been able to do it month on month, thanks with your support and participation. And it gives me great pleasure to bring today Raj Menon, the President for Asia Pacific, other than China, for Marriott International, as my guest for today. Before I invite Raj to join in, just a quick housekeeping aspect. As you all know, we've typically ensured that all the participation is sort of smooth without any interruptions, so everybody is muted other than the speakers. If you want to ask questions, there are boxes within the different apps that you may be using or the different devices that you may be using, indicated here as to where you can post in your questions. Our team will attend to those questions and pass them on to me. Do not use the raise your hand option because that feature will not be looked at by us. I hope you do enjoy this chat. May I now invite Raj Menon to please join me on the chat.
Good afternoon, Vijay, and good afternoon, everybody. Great to be with you.
Yeah, I believe you're in Sydney, Australia. So a late good evening to you, and I hope you haven't gone there to help the English team do better than they have.
Well, you know, I'm just thrilled that the Aussies have had a great start. What a great day they had today. So first set is all, you know, first test is all set to be taken by the Aussies. So we can't wait. In fact, I'm going for the Boxing Day match, and then we're going to go and see the Sydney test at SCG, and very excited.
That's good for you. You're lucky. We've just had some cricket in Mumbai, not so exciting. But anyway, just to do a little bit of introduction to Raj for those who don't know him. He spent more than 20 years with Marriott International. Before that, he was with ITC. He was with Stamford Hotels, with Radisson Hotels in Australia. I think his career has been largely in India and Australia in terms of the base. Of course, he looks after the entire Asia Pacific region, which is about 22 countries. He's now based in Singapore, and he's involved in multiple activities and institutions across the hotel sector. If I go on describing all of that, it's going to take a lot of time. I'd rather hear from you, Rajeev, rather than talk about you. So let's get on with it. You know, you're looking, as we said, 22 countries. Tell us, contrast the different countries, how they have worked out over the last 18 plus months of the COVID pandemic. What are the challenges you've seen? What are the differences you've seen in impact, in approach, in outlook, whatever?
So Vijay, if there has been one thing consistent about all countries across Asia Pacific in terms of how they've, you know, managed the pandemic, it is that they've largely been doing their own thing. I can't recall two countries coming together to kind of formulate plans. It's really, we haven't seen too much bilateral dialogue here in terms of how to handle the pandemic. It really has been a country by country specific steps that they have taken that they felt was right for their population and how they felt it was important to handle the crisis. On our side, we've spent a lot of time lobbying governments, at least to, you know, formulate consistent approach in terms of how to handle travelers, what vaccine passes to look at, how to focus on vaccinations. But I will say that in most cases across Asia, and it really is not across Asia, as I talk to my colleagues around the world, pretty much every country has gone their own way when it came to handling the pandemic. Now, if I look at, you know, some of the developed countries in my part of the world, like Japan, Australia, Singapore, they moved very early to provide considerable support to the industry. Markets like Japan also had a very strong stimulus. Even Thailand had a very strong stimulus domestic campaign. Japan's campaign was worth $13 billion to stimulate domestic demand during COVID. And they were giving up to 35% subsidies on hotel stays, on flights, on shopping, and so on and so forth. So it really has been different measured by different countries. And on our front, our focus has really been to look at each market individually, focus on what we need to do in that specific market to address the situation, work closely with the government, and then navigate through the pandemic.
So I understand that each country, the authorities, the government have taken different views, different approaches, and they have to look at first doing what is right for their country before they look at anything else. How has the hotel industry reacted in these varied situations? I mean, ultimately for the hotel industry, it is the question of occupancy, rate, F&B, costs, people in, people out. And what I mean by that is people in are the guests and the people otherwise working at the hotel industry. So how has that been different in terms of the reactions, approaches, outlooks in the different countries, owners in different countries? How has that played out?
So let me focus on three specific things. First and foremost, we have been quite blessed that right after Starwood acquisition, we moved very quickly to put the resources closest to the market. And by that, I mean we have fully established area offices now across many major markets in Asia Pacific. And it was almost a godsend when the pandemic hit, because our teams and our area vice presidents, our leadership teams in market could pretty much work aggressively with the government, with our owners, to formulate the local solutions that were required to navigate through the pandemic. When you look at different markets, as I said earlier, governments in many markets have played a very vital role in supporting the industry. When you look at Singapore, for example, the government for months was paying 75% of all Singapore employees' salaries up to 4,000 Singapore dollars a month. That then got tapered off to 50%, 30%, and then 10%, and so on. Similarly, we saw similar measures even in markets like Thailand, which supported associates, anybody that was working in travel and tourism, up to about 9,000 baht. They also had this, again, domestic campaign. So it really has been individual market situation, solution, working with our area teams, closely working with the government, closely working with our owner partners to figuring out what do we need to do to navigate the best way through this crisis. And as a result, I can't say that we have had one standard format. It really has varied. What we did do very early on is create a framework, took some very, very aggressive steps in right-sizing our business very early on by market. We also very early on pivoted heavily into localization efforts, and I call the strategy as hyper-local strategy, because to us, that was the only business that was available at any given time. So in many markets, you see our hotels doing a lot of quarantine business, like Australia and Singapore. And then you've got other countries where we were heavily involved with governments on bringing in travelers that were coming in from different countries, providing certain quarantine measures, or in some cases, even accommodating medical staff.
So what was the one country or the two countries that were the most difficult to deal with because of situations? That's one part of the question. The next would be, were there one or two aspects of response which were sort of pretty consistent across, or when I say across, may not be all your countries, may not be all the hotels, but as a measure that was sort of widely used?
I would say, generally South Asia, India, and certain countries in Southeast Asia were by far the most difficult because there was very little government support in comparison to number of other markets, right?
Yeah, there was no support. Let's about that. Yeah,
I'm not going to mince words. So as a result, you really had to be very aggressive very quickly on both fronts, on managing the cost piece and creatively figuring out ways to drive revenue. What I was, amazed by is the incredible amount of innovation we saw from our teams on the ground. In previous years, pre-COVID, you kind of push innovation downwards. This is where we actually saw innovation happening on the ground because it was all about survival, right? This is where I say in the last 2 years, we came a lot closer together with even our owners, our partners, and figured out ways to best navigate through the crisis for that specific hotel, because cash flow management, how we focused on bringing in a certain amount of business into those hotels, how we clustered positions of multi-skilled associates was critical, that we were all aligned so that we could eventually all be successful.
Yeah, and I'm going to come back to the question of the innovation and the changes a little bit later, because I guess the question that would come up is that why did we need a pandemic to do some of this? But let's address that later. I think let's stay with the question of the response to the pandemic. And I think the one thing which everybody has had to do in different measures is the sizing of the operations in terms of the people. And that's never easy because you've got to ask people to go or to materially take hits on salaries and whatever else. And we're also seeing that the industry is facing a dearth of challenge, or the dearth of skill and people availability when it's starting to hire back. So almost, I mean, and I'm saying this is at an industry level, not necessarily at a chain level. So please recognize that. What does the industry do now to sort of almost win back that confidence of the staff? What kind of messaging is necessary? And what is the message that needs to go out to the younger generations, the students who are in the process of joining the industry and don't know what it's all about now? How would you respond and advise on these two matters?
So I think first and foremost, we need to recognize that in the last year or so, across the world of travel and tourism, well over 150 million jobs were displaced. And many of these folks have simply left the industry because of the volatility of the industry. They've simply gone to industries that are just much more stable, and they feel that they can earn their living without their lives being disrupted in a big way. I think as recovery starts, as an industry, I believe we have our work cut out for at least the next 2 to 3 years. First, we need to really focus hard about promoting what is great about this industry, what attracted people like us to this industry in the first place. And those fundamentals haven't changed. This is a pandemic that one would say comes in 100 years. And I think if we go back, we hope so, right? If we go back and focus on the fundamentals of this industry, which to me remain incredibly strong, remain incredibly promising from building long-term careers, that will help people think about coming back. And then it's about really investing in developing the local talent, which many companies have done a pretty good job over the years, and last couple of years kind of set us back a little bit. We need to get back to the basics. We need to wrap our arms around people. We need to invest back. I continue to say, for every organization, if you had a strong culture like Marriott did, we withdrew from the trust bank of our associates in the last 2 years. And thankfully so, because we had that strength in our culture. People believed in the organization and they supported us. Now, in the next couple of years, we need to invest back into that trust bank. We need to put our arms around people. We need to show them what great career growth means like. What does international growth mean? Because that's the reason many people come to our industry. And if we can demonstrate some of these things, we will start seeing the fun element coming back into our business. And people will start to trickle back. And I think it won't be before long that we'll have, the right amount of talent we need in our hotels to do what we've always done, take great care of our people, as well as so that they can take great care of our customers.
So you talked about the growth opportunity or the growth aspect or the future aspect to show the people. Is there any other element? I mean, around confidence, around maybe empathy, around the fact that they need to feel more secure. Is that something that needs to be done, and how would you go about doing that?
So again, I talk about this piece about building global careers, right? People, yes, a lot of people got displaced, but if we can demonstrate that we are slowly going to be going back to what was good about our industry, giving people incredible exposure to build strong global careers, that to me creates that safety net, right? Because that I can move out of one country, I can go into another, and I can do some great hoteliering. The creativity that's coming into our business, the entrepreneurship that I see all around the industry is incredible. And it really is about promoting all those aspects of our business. Honestly, 30 odd years in, I still love, everything about our business. And to me, it really is about, engaging with the youngsters, showing them the path, showing them the excitement, how much fun this industry is, and letting them experience it for themselves. And you will see that they will come back, because it is an incredible industry.
So how would you message, or what message would you give to the students of today, or the people who are just about joining the industry? How would you allay their concerns or their fears of the future? What would you say to that? And that's a specific question come from the audience as well.
So first and foremost, one of the things I'm saying to our young managers is what they have experienced today. No classroom will ever be able to provide that training, right? I think all of us have had an incredible learning experience in the last 2 years. And if any of us uses these crises to turn into an opportunity, it would provide a stimulus for growth. And if you've gone through this, navigated your way through this, you are set up for success for many, many years to come. That's the one part. The second part, which is, again, a fundamental piece that we see, and at least gives me a lot of confidence and comfort. The one part of our business that hasn't slowed down, Vijay, is the development part, right? We continue to see aggressive growth around the world, but more so in Asia Pacific, right? Just as I look at close to home in India, 2021, with all the challenges we've had, humanitarian crisis through the second quarter, Marriott is very close to having a record signing year that we've ever had since we started our journey in India. I mean, to say that in a year like this is incredible. Now, what does that mean? That means incredible opportunities for growth for our team members, anybody who wants to come into the business. And I don't just say this for Marriott, I see, development activity, investment activity remains pretty robust across the industry, across our 22 markets. And if you were to look at any industry that is growing, that provides you that growth opportunity, you would very quickly be attracted to that business, because if you did half decent job, you will grow in that business. And then finally, to me, what I've always been excited about this business is what I talked about earlier, the fun part of this business. No one day is the same. It is a true global business. The level of creativity, the engagement you get, experience you create for yourself and for people around you are just incredible. I mean, in many cases, it goes back to the MasterCard ad. It's priceless. Those experiences, you can't buy those experiences. So that's what is good about our industry. And I think in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now, you will continue to see the growth that we've been seeing in the last 20 years. And if I was a youngster, I can tell you, I got to becoming a GM by a certain time. Our youngsters today will do that in half the time. So if that doesn't convince you, then I'm not sure what else we can do.
Okay. I think we can do something more, which is to analyze and help look at what is driving this development growth and positivity. It's great to have that positivity. On the one hand, we say that the travel industry, which includes hotels, has been among the worst hit, if not the worst hit in the pandemic, simply because when borders are closed, when travel is shut, hotels are shut and airlines are in a problem. And yet, we've got this kind of development outlook, positivity, and I agree with you. In India, it's been very positive over the last few weeks, several weeks now. It's a dichotomy. What do you make of that dichotomy? What's driving that?
So my answer is simple. The pandemic, if you look from a long-term perspective, and again, go back 100 years, Spanish flu, it is a blip in the scheme of things from a long-term perspective. And let me give you some very simple examples. First, I don't think I need to convince anybody today that the pent-up demand across every country, as soon as restrictions are eased, is huge, right? To the point we are seeing what we call as revenge travel. Okay. The second thing I will say, Marriott as a company, we just released our third quarter results. So while occupancy globally was 58%, our RevPAR globally was negative 28%, or 26%, sorry. Our average rate was only down 4% to 2019 third quarter. Why am I highlighting that? Rate recovery in many markets is almost exceeding occupancy recovery, and rate is coming back faster, to the point that we see luxury in many markets, resorts are way past 2019 numbers. And as a result, it is clear that once things settle down in any market, as soon as restrictions are eased, countries move to open the borders up, business comes back roaring in. Travelers are desperate to get out on the road. And as a result, if you were an investor, you're almost taking a view that let me use this time to either get into the business, to get ready for the wave that's coming, or use the opportunity to refurbish my hotel if you have the money. But really, the second piece is the amount of liquidity that's out there in the market, which is also driving considerable investment into our industry. And I think it all really sets us up for a pretty strong future, where people think that, as soon as the pandemic is behind us, we'll be in a normalized environment.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is that it's going to be a rare situation where people are actually going to be making the investment when the time is bad so that they can capitalize on the good time. Very often we've seen, at least in India, that people make the investment at the peak. And by the time they made the investment and the project takes 3 or 4 years, the market is not so good and they're actually hitting with new supply at the wrong time. So maybe that's a good thing that's coming out of this. Let's go back to the question that we asked at the start. Why did it take the pandemic to force us to make fundamental changes, maybe innovation, maybe working with lesser number of people than we were before, all those changes? Why did we need an external force to push us to do that? And how long is that going to last?
So I think, a couple of things. If you look at human psyche, we generally tend to be creatures of habit. I think what the pandemic has done is really forced many of us to leapfrog in terms of using technology 5 years, be it our customers, our associates, every stakeholder I see across the board. The second thing I will say is what we thought was critical to the way we did business in a world of pandemic wasn't critical anymore, right? There were other ways that we had to figure out of how to do business. And case in point, for every meeting, folks like you and me would jump on a plane and show up. And here we just simply couldn't. Now, it doesn't mean that travel will disappear, but we will be a little bit more astute in terms of figuring out where we need to go to have a face-to-face meeting and where we're going to use Zoom. So I think what the pandemic forced us in many ways was to fight for survival, which is an extreme situation. And for many of us, as we took some of those hard decisions, as we found those alternative ways of doing business, many of us sat back and said, hey, what we thought was impossible is actually possible. So let's try and see if we can make this the new norm. Now, I think the reality is going to land somewhere in the middle. It's not going to be one extreme this side or one extreme this side. It's going to be somewhere in the middle. Let me give you another example. When we talk about technology, pre-COVID, I don't remember showing up to any restaurant where you got given a QR code to look at your menu. If we did, 9 times out of 10, you and I would probably walk out of the restaurant. Today, if somebody gives you a hard menu, you kind of look at them and go, well, you don't have a QR code. When you look at our apps, today on a Marriott Bonvoy app, from the time you make your reservation to the time you show up to the hotel, to making mobile requests, be it dining or engaging with our associates on the app, to pretty much doing everything till the point of checkout and filling up your guest survey. If you choose, you don't have to interact with one single associate. Now, the way I see it now is that customers want that option. In some cases, they will choose that option. In other cases, what we are hearing is they want the good old service, that personalized attention, one-on-one service, like they did pre-COVID. And that's where the balancing act is going to come, that we'll have to make sure we are able to deliver on both fronts. But much of the productivity gains we made during the crisis, that we are able to keep them whole as we move beyond the crisis. So I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle, the way I see it.
And how will you achieve that middle with an owner, with ownerships? And I understand both positions. From an owner's perspective, you don't want to add more people than you absolutely need to, because obviously it hits your earnings. From an operator's perspective, you may want the additional people because that's what helps you deliver or gives you the pool of people with which you can deliver, the additional pool of people. How are we going to be effectively convincing the owners that when we were working fine with a 1.2, X ratio, well, let's not get into a number. Yes, occupancies have gone up and people will understand that there is some increase necessary. Where is that middle path going to be found? Is it going to be just hotel to hotel? Is it going to be by brand standards? How is that going to work out?
So I will say this, that owners broadly have been incredible partners through this crisis, to the point that every year we do an independent owner survey, annual survey, and what we've seen in the crisis in our part of the world is our satisfaction scores have actually gone up consistently last year as well as this year. And we work very, very closely with them. I continue to say one thing, Vijay, that if you look at a stool with 3 legs, one being profit, one being customer, and another one being associates, you start to cut any one leg in half, the stool basically falls apart. So you've got to have that balance. And what we've experienced early on, and it's just not me, many of my international colleagues in some of the mature markets, where as demand came back really strong very quickly, we were almost forced in a couple of months to basically say we're going to have to put a limit on the number of rooms we can sell because we just don't have the people to service them, right?
Sure. Sure.
And that's the time the owners stood shoulder to shoulder with us and said, listen, we need to together work out and figure out ways that how we bring the right technology, the right people, give them the training, whatever support you need to basically get ourselves back up on our feet so that we don't have to cap occupancy ever again. And I agree with them, right? But it also is, if we had 100 people running the hotel in the past, can we now do with 90 or 85? Where is that balance sit, right? And again, in most cases, through really smart ways, or one, use of technology, both on the customer side as well as the associate side, to high levels of multi-skilling, which is something that as an industry, we didn't do the best job at. And then also looking at opportunity of where we can cluster resources, right? Where we can leverage our size to drive more to the bottom line. And I think those are the things we've been able to deliver during the pandemic. And I think as we come out of it, we should be able to do the same, just continuing to balance all the sides of the stool.
So effectively, if I look at it differently, what you're saying is that we will have to, rebalance upwards likely the service side of it, but the back office side of it, the non-service side of it, we need to get as much synergy as we can and optimize that, maximize that through technology, shared services, and whatever else that can be done. I think that's a fair answer, or a fair approach to it. You talked about the word survival, and I know you mentioned that in a different context, but I have a different question here, or I want to use that context. On the one hand, we say survival of the fittest. On the other hand, we also recognize that if you really have to be, you have to be among the top 2 or 3 players, if not the biggest 1 or 2 players, to be really successful. These are in a way linked, in a way different. what, according to you, will be the key parameters that will dictate success, the recognition of success, the measure of success going forward?
You know, I'm a believer that you could be small, you could be a, you know, a boutique luxury hotel operating somewhere in Rajasthan, or you could be the size of Marriott or Taj or Oberoi or one of the other international companies, not just the Indian ones. If you are great at what you do, you will survive the pandemic. Performance trumps all. That's my first piece, right? Scale helps. Undeniably, scale helps. But even with scale or as a standalone, if you don't play to your strengths, you will fail. So the key thing in the pandemic, that at least from my learning point of view, is where is the opportunity? What are your strengths? And how are you going to play to become successful there? How are you going to use the crisis, turn it into an opportunity to come out stronger than before you went into it? And that's where there's going to be this push and pull of, you know, again, from our perspective, we figured, being the big international player that we were globally, that if we didn't pivot hard on hyper local strategy, we would be in trouble.
Yeah, sure.
Right? To some extent, you know, a local company in most of our 20-odd markets had an advantage on us. So we then had to figure out what is our strength here. And our strength really, for all the years I've been in the company, particularly in the last 4 or 5 years, is our combined loyalty program, the Marriott Bonvoy, right? So we went really hard in local efforts, in one, communicating to our members in language, in countries where, you know, that was an important part. Simple. Indonesia, we now have an Indonesian Bahasa website, which I could have not convinced the company 2 years ago to have. We have a Thai website. You know, we've been able to create these incredible local partnerships in different markets, like the one I announced last week when I was in Japan with Rakuten, which, by the way, has 100 million Japanese as members of their, you know, e-commerce platform. And now we have the ability, with our 3 million Japanese Bonvoy members, to be able to offer all of these other 100 million folks special, you know, Marriott Bonvoy rates. So where I'm going with it is, we are seeing incredible results because of these hyper local strategies that we followed in each of the market. But every market, we've had to create a different solution. It has not been a consistent one. So that's where to me, it shouldn't just be about scale, because you could have scale and still fail if you don't adapt very quickly. It's about adapting. It's about playing to your strengths and converting those, you know, the crisis into the opportunity.
I'm glad you've elaborated this, but I do still want to pursue one aspect of my question. You very nicely explained what is the survival piece, not just the survival in the sense, but coming back stronger in terms of whether it's the hyper local strategy, using what's best for you, or addressing local issues or local advantages to the best advantage, you know, in the most positive manner. That's fine. We are back. Let's say we are back at sort of post-pandemic, ready to move, industry growing well. What, according to you, will be the top 2 or 3 parameters where 5 years from now, 7 years from now, which will be the measure for success? I mean, most times in the industry, it's been, you know, capacity, inventory, loyalty member programs, maybe, obviously revenues, maybe. What will be anything different as a parameter for success in the future?
So again, to me, I don't necessarily see a dramatic shift in parameters for success, because for us, we measure our success every year through a very simple balanced scorecard approach. And it's back to that stool with three-leg strategy, right? Because the moment you go over biased on one, you fall on the other. The whole stool falls apart. It is about balancing act, because again, Vijay, if you go overboard on the customer side and you're not able to deliver the profit, no owner is going to have your brand on the building.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, it is about driving performance. For, you know, I've been now associated with India for over 20 odd years. And to me, I've consistently said, nothing beats great performance. Nothing beats incredible food and beverage experience. Nothing beats, you know, a hotel that is able to deliver true quality on one side, but also balanced by delivering great profitability and at the same time taking great care of its people. So it is not going to be one measure that one can say is gonna set you apart. As a company, I can tell you the stock market is not going to stop looking at us from growth point of view, right? They still expect Marriott to grow at a certain rate. And you know, if you ever ask Mr. Marriott, he will simply tell you, one, success is never final, and his favorite word is more. He wants more of everything.
Sure.
So,
sure.
so it really, as an organization for us, it's going to be a balancing approach, but still continuing to be focused on all those elements of our balanced scorecard that keep the stool, you know, firmly grounded, but continues to drive incredible market share and performance.
So there is no order of priority between customer, employee, or associate and owner. They're all on the top rung.
They're all held together as the three legs of the stool, right?
Yeah, yeah. What do you see as the brand landscape in India going forward? How do you see that changing, evolving, helping, hurting over the next few years?
You know, I think India has been on an incredible journey, particularly in the last 20, 25 years. When you look at when we opened our first hotel in India back in December 99, you know, how much international players were there in India, it was very limited. You know, I have the world of respect for the Indian hotel brands, be it Oberoi, be it Taj, ITC, and I think they will all push to continue to grow, rightly so. I think you will continue to see more players coming into the market, and as the market continues to, you know, mature, what I'm now seeing, say 15 years ago, we saw cities break out into from CBDs to secondary business districts to, you know, what we would call as PBDs, peripheral business districts. Now you're starting to see the same thing play out in the resorts world, that you are starting to see these incredible resorts pop up around some of the major cities around India. And people are truly, you know, as they acquire more wealth, are moving out and using these incredible facilities that are being built, be it in Sona in Delhi or Lonavala or Mahabaleshwar, or, you know, we all know the destinations. So I think the market will continue to mature, the Indian consumer continues to become more and more global. And when I look at Marriott per se, today we are now getting closer to 130 hotels across the country in 36 cities with about 16 odd brands. And again, this is all in the last 21 years. So I would say in the next 5 to 10, could we double that? Could we be at 250 hotels with incredible presence in all segments of the hotel business? Absolutely, because there is, all you got to do is look at mature markets like US, look at how China has grown. India still has incredible opportunity for growth across the country with the same population base as China.
Obviously, if you have to grow all these hotels, you need a lot of happy owners, and you have happy owners. But how difficult or how easy are the Indian owners? And I'm putting the easy word just to create that at least a two-leg balance here. How difficult is it to deal with Indian owners? What are the differences of having to deal with Indian owners versus dealing with owners in other parts of Asia? Forget the difficult part. Let's just talk about this.
Listen, I will tell you this, that every market is different. And I never ever would say one is more difficult than the other, because we are all product of the circumstances that we are in, right? I think Indian owners tend to be very entrepreneurial, because if they weren't, they wouldn't be in this business in the first place. You look at the cost of land acquisition, the cost of building hotels. It's not the easiest business to be in. Let's put it this way. But if you are a well balanced player, you have done your planning, you know the business, then this is also a business that you can actually, it's not about survival, it's about thriving in this business. And we have many partners who have genuinely thrived in India in the hotel business. And I'm a believer that they will continue to do exceptionally well over the years. But the one thing we need to keep in mind in Indian context, it's about you have to fight on your own in most cases, right? The pandemic showed us that the government support was minimal at best. I mean, the only place where owners were helped was really, okay, you can restructure your loan a little bit. When we saw countries like even Thailand provide people working in the industry with some support, we saw all kinds of subsidies and other things being dished out. And this is not about kind of putting the government down, because Indian government didn't have a choice, right? In simple terms, they had so much going on that they couldn't just focus on one simple industry. So it really, from that perspective, I think, again, if you had asked me 15 years ago, would Marriott be where we are today? I couldn't have put my hand in my heart and say, yeah, we'd be there. But today, looking back, seeing how things have played out, seeing how some incredible developers have come through, extremely entrepreneurial, and have done exceedingly well through the business, I think you will see the next generation of these guys coming through. Will there be people who stumble? Yeah, for sure. That happens in every business. So
what will they expect different from you as an operator, which maybe the previous generation did not?
I think they will expect continued partnership. They will expect us to keep them engaged in, and more importantly, continue to listen to them, continue to be very local when we talk about strategies. and just make sure that we're doing business the right way. Simple as that. If I look back to 20 years ago, and again, I'm not a believer that any organization or any individual is perfect. I would have said 20 years ago, we were a very, very American company, right? And at that, today, we are a much more local company in India, and have learned over the many years. And that journey needs to continue because we have to adapt. Now, in that context, doesn't mean that we suddenly lose out all our strength that makes us global, because there are a lot of things that make us an incredibly strong global player. But it's how you blend the both in. And I have this belief that at least what we've been saying through the pandemic is, if we can really hone in our hyper-local strategies and become good at the domestic side, as soon as international business comes back, hopefully we'll be in an even stronger position.
And I agree with you completely that, as an international player, you probably were focused or were expected to focus, whichever, on the international side of business, and therefore the need to sort of get deeper into the domestic was necessary, and you, as you said, you pursued that. What is the one big change in owner-operator relationships that will survive the pandemic, that is going to be fundamental, which is a shift, a major shift in the way the relationships have been handled or have been structured previously?
Again, what I've seen over the last many years, it really, it was the so-called, you work hard to get the management agreement across the line, and then you get going. My view has always been that management agreement is almost like a prenup, right? It's there, but you as partners need to build the level of trust. And I can tell you, anywhere there's that level of trust, transparency, that partnership has got only stronger through the pandemic. And again, doesn't mean that you don't have disagreements, doesn't mean that sometimes you're not at cross paths with each other, but the one thing we saw through the pandemic is, if you really engage and are able to understand each other's position, then often you can find a solution that works for everybody. And I think, again, I've never been a believer that be it the owner or the management company can, use a high-handed approach and get on top of each other, because anytime that happens, those relationships don't survive.
Yes.
In simple terms, it is truly about building that trust. And where you make a mistake, you take it on the chin. You sit in front of the owner and say, listen, I made a mistake here. That's the part. And to me, every bit of feedback we see today, that's the one thing that stands out stronger. It's about being trusted and just being engaged to understand what my issue is. And not every time you can have the answer, but at least if you understand, then it's genuinely appreciated.
Yeah, if that dialogue is based on trust, then that dialogue will always produce a positive answer. That I completely agree with you. What is your view on franchising in India? I'm not talking. I know Marriott does a lot of franchising in the US, but let's talk about the Indian market. What is your view on franchising?
So let me share with you a couple of things. One is, when you looked at pre-Starwood acquisition, Marriott chose a path of almost being a pure management company. Starwood chose a path of, a blend of both, right? Today, as I look at the landscape, I think our partnership with ITC, in particular with Luxury Collection, is an incredible partnership. And we continue to see that growing for decades because we have a partner who not only is exceptional at running the hotels, but also understands everything there is about quality. It's like, two professionals sitting across the table and having a conversation, figuring out a strategy map and heading in a particular direction. And that trust that I talked about earlier exists. I think with a number of other franchisees, there are a few who are what I would call as great entrepreneurial hoteliers. And as far as I'm concerned, there is no problem with us continuing to franchise and grow with them. But on a broad scale, I believe that the market is not mature yet for a lot of franchising. Because, again, if I learn from our own, and I take full responsibility of everything we've done in the past, even as Starwood, you think about some of the brands where we've almost had to basically pull ourselves out to now start to reestablish the brand in the market. So it really is going to be, Vijay, a very focused individual by individual approach, rather than taking a view that India is ready for mass franchising and then running with it, because I think that could be quite problematic.
Yes, and I think you're right that a mass franchising approach or a pure franchising approach is going to be fraught with risk. So that you'll have to take an individual approach. We're sort of coming to the end of time. I didn't realize we'd already used up most of the hour. I have two questions for you before we end.
Mm-hmm.
Subject of ESG. What is your message to the industry on that subject?
My personal view is, if you look at pre-COVID, really I look back to the 3 years pre-COVID, and as an industry, we were starting to make a dent on this particular issue. Before that, there were some organizations that were doing very well at it, but broadly as an industry, we hadn't paid too much heed. There was a lot of lip service across the board as an industry, and it was really, I would say, 3 years pre-pandemic that you really started to see the shift. The industry was starting to wake up. We were starting to set ourselves benchmarks. We were starting to push against it. We were taking decisions on plastic, usage. We were doing all kinds of stuff. Pandemic has set us back for sure, particularly the last couple of years. I think as we transition to next year, we now need to get back and put aggressive focus behind ESG, because if we don't, we will be left behind. And every bit of survey that we see from consulting firms, be it Bain, be it McKinsey, be it others, particularly coming out of the pandemic, it clearly points to the fact that consumers are today more focused on purposeful brands, and consumers are more focused on sustainability. Your own associates are more focused on sustainability, and they're going to hold you accountable. And I think, it's the right thing to do, in simple terms. So there will be much more focus on taking aggressive steps. You look at, the decision we made a couple of months ago, which has been publicized across the board about putting, these electric charging facilities for cars all around our hotels. I think, be it the piece around amenities shifting, be it focus around, what we had been starting to do in some of our resorts, convert moisture into drinking water. So the industry was taking steps, but at a varied scale. And I think as we come out of the pandemic, we all need to get aggressively behind this effort. Otherwise, consumers will, and our own associates will not let us forget it.
So you're saying that there will be that visibility push over time from the customer side and from the associate side, forget the investment community or the stock exchanges. I think I agree with you that visibility, if it is not there, it should come through. If nothing else, it will force owners and operators to concentrate on this subject. A last point to you, Raj. What are your 3 key mantras for success? And don't tell me the story about the three-legged stool anymore.
No, I'll tell you in simple terms. First and foremost, surround yourself with the best team possible. 2, set up a performance management framework so that everybody knows what is expected of them. Give them empowerment to go and run their business within that framework. And then finally, I've always been a believer, lead from the front, look at the glass half full and focus on the opportunities, push yourself, push the team on setting the benchmarks. And then as part of that, celebrate success, because we all want to be part of a winning team, right? And when you've got a team that is kicking goals and you don't celebrate, you don't give the recognition, unfortunately, it falls apart. It's when you're together, huddled up, and you celebrate, you recognize each other for the incredible work. Believe you me, just the success is never final. You just keep going and going and going. So that's those are my 3 specific things.
Yeah, and it's an encouragement to succeed so that you can celebrate, right?
Exactly.
So, before I end this chat and I say a final thank you to you for this evening, Raj, I just want to say a little bit about, extend my tribute, express my tribute, and sort of the humble recognition to the memory of Arne Sorensen. This is the first time that I have, since his passing, have had somebody from Marriott on a chat like this. So I thought I'll use this opportunity. He was a visionary leader, a friend to all in the industry, and a man with deep empathy and humaneness. I've seen him in Delhi, in Mumbai, I think once, and he just came across as a very, very humane, simple person, a very visionary person, and the industry is much the poorer for his passing. I just thought I'd express my thoughts on that. Thank you for spending this evening with me. And to all of you delegates who participated today, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year in advance. Yes, Raj, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, if I can say one thing, Arne was a personal mentor to me, but more importantly, he loved India. And I will just say 2 things. This is in early 2000s. He brought his entire family, although his wife had taught in Kodaikanal some 35 years ago. And he brought his entire family to India. He was the CFO of the company at that time. And we offered him all the good things every company does, private cars, everything. He wanted to go to Varanasi and he said he was going to take a train. We could not convince him otherwise. He took a train. Few years later, I was with him when we did the groundbreaking ceremony for JW Calcutta. And he said to me that afternoon, Raj, let's go to the Howrah Bridge. I want to walk the Old Harbor Bridge. And both of us walked that bridge. He loved every bit about India and was just an incredible leader. So I'm genuinely proud to have worked with him and for him. And thank you for your kind words.
And I'm sure all the success that Marriott has in India will be, he'll be looking down on, looking at it with a lot of joy. So thank you. And for everybody who's joined me today, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year in advance. Thank you again for all your support through the 1 year, actually 13 fireside chats that I've hosted since last year. I actually began with Neeraj Govil on the 11th of December last year, right? So we will continue with this program, this form, maybe a little bit different form in 2022. I look forward to your continued support. Stay well, stay healthy. Thank you, and wish you all the best. Thanks, Raj.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.